Amber Pollock. This lesson is on a commodity-based currency. In this lesson, the student learns that money can be exchanged for a commodity. For this educational system that I have developed, I chose marbles as the commodity to back up money. In this lesson, I will explain why I chose marbles, and in doing so, I will also cover what qualities a commodity must have in order to be used as currency. So in this lesson, the student is taught that $1 can be exchanged for 2 marbles. They are then given different dollar amounts and asked how many marbles this would exchange for. So 50 cents would exchange for 1 marble, $1 would exchange for 2 marbles, $2 would exchange for 4 marbles, and so on. This may seem like a simple lesson on multiplication and division. It may hone some skills of multiplication and division, and certainly a student needs to know how to multiply and divide to do this lesson. But what we're really teaching is that 1 marble is 50 cents, is 50 cents, is 50 cents. This exchange rate is fixed. There's nothing tricky or complicated about it. It is a simple, direct conversion. An implicit lesson being taught to the student is that when money is pegged to a commodity, the value of that money will rise or fall with the value of the commodity. So for instance, if there was a marble mine found and more marbles were to enter the economy, the value of each marble would go down. Unfortunately, this would mean that the value of our currency would also go down. The more likely situation, however, is that over time, the marbles will gradually go up in value, thus strengthening our currency. So why did I choose marbles? I'm going to explain why I chose marbles by comparing them to other potential candidates for a commodity to back our currency. This is also a lesson for the students. So the first candidate for commodity that I have is toys. So what would happen if we set $1 to buy 1 toy? So you go to the bank with your dollar and you want to get your wealth back out. The first problem is you may haggle with the bank over which toy to get. Each toy is very different and thus different in value. So the problem with toys is that there's too much variability among the toys. The quality we want in a commodity to use as a currency is that it is fungible. And fungible is just a fancy way of saying that one unit of something easily stands in for another unit. Marbles are fungible. A marble is a marble. It doesn't matter which marbles you get when you trade your money for marbles. So the next candidate I have for a commodity is candy. So what would happen if we set $1 to 1 piece of candy? So you go to the bank, they give you a piece of candy. You really don't care which piece of candy you get. For the most part, they're all the same. But you go home, and the value in candy is that you can eat it. There's very little value in candy otherwise. So you eat your candy, and now your wealth is gone. So the first problem with candy is that it is consumable. Even if you were to hold on to your candy, eventually the candy will go bad. So the second problem is that candy is perishable. The qualities we are looking for in a good commodity is that it is not consumable and not perishable. Marbles hold up because they are not consumable and not perishable. The next candidate for a commodity is rocks. Rocks are fungible, they are not consumable, and they are not perishable. So what would happen if we set $1 to 1 rock? Well, if rocks are used as currency, this means a rock can be traded on the market for virtually any type of wealth. This would make rocks very desirable. So if you were to get some rocks and put them outside in your garden, they would be constantly subject to theft. The quality we are looking for in a good commodity for our currency is that it is a luxury. We want something that we can put away in a vault and only get it out so often to use. Rocks, having a functional use, cannot be put away. Marbles are meant for entertainment, and thus we can put them away and bring them out only so often. Thus they are a luxury and we can use them. The other problem with rocks is that they are very abundant and each rock is not very valuable. If we did try to put them in vaults, it would be a logistical nightmare. There's just so many rocks and it would be completely ridiculous. What we want is a commodity that is more rare than abundant, and it needs to be very valuable. So in looking at the rocks versus the marbles, we had set one marble to 50 cents. We probably couldn't set a rock to 50 cents. We probably would set a rock to about a penny. So although a rock and a marble are about the same size, the marbles are worth more. And it is this density of value that we are looking for to make a good commodity. This next candidate for a commodity might seem a bit weird, but why would an iPad or any other electronic device make for a bad currency? Well, first of all, you can't set one iPad to $1. iPads currently go for about $500. So if you had your money, and I want to emphasize that this is just paper money, it is not the actual wealth that backs up money. But if you had your money, and you only had $300, and you went to the bank, and you wanted to get some wealth out, the bank can't give you wealth, because they can't give you 3/5 of an iPad. So the problem with an iPad is that it is not very divisible. Another problem with the iPad, and this is a problem with some of our other candidates, is that their value won't endure. 10 years from now, people probably won't want this particular iPad. This iPad is already old technology because it's an iPad 1, and iPad 2 has already come out. So we want something that 500 years ago people wanted, and 500 years from now people will still want. Marbles hold up because they are a fairly classic toy. They have an enduring value that we are looking for in a good commodity. Another problem with the iPad and many of our other candidates is that they can fluctuate in supply. This is especially problematic when you set a commodity as the currency. If we set Tootsie Rolls as our currency, this again would mean that Tootsie Rolls can be traded for any wealth at any time. Tootsie Roll production would skyrocket. As there were more Tootsie Rolls, the value of our dollar would go down. Also, whatever commodity is used will eventually become exhausted. Everyone will want that commodity, and the Earth's supply of it will exhaust. This is why gold or silver make a good commodity. People spend a lot of time, money, and energy trying to find gold or silver, and they are very rarely successful. That's bad for them, but for us to use it as a currency, it's ideal because the supply will not fluctuate. Also, it's all the better if people want to scour the earth for these difficult to obtain metals. This is also a problem with our marbles. We can, of course, increase the supply of marbles just like the other candidates. To get around this, we will artificially say that these are the only marbles allowed in the classroom, thus keeping the supply constant. I have one last comment on what makes a good commodity for currency. It doesn't have to be something that every person wants in every circumstance. First of all, this is impossible. There is no commodity that every person will want in every circumstance. The goal is to find a commodity that most people want in many circumstances. So with gold and silver, it is true that you may not want them. However, the goal is to have a commodity such that when you go to the market, other people want that commodity and will trade you for something that you do want. This is something to keep in mind. Gold and silver and precious metals are only one commodity in an economy. They serve a very specific and limited purpose. It's a very important purpose if they are backing up our money, but they can't feed you and they can't clothe you. A wide variety of commodities are needed to satisfy all human needs. This will be an important lesson to remember in later lessons, especially on mercantilism. So marbles do have one limitation, and that is that they are only divisible down to 50 cents. We set one marble to 50 cents, and no one wants a half a marble. So this is as low as we can divide our currency. In my opinion, this is an acceptable limitation. The only time this will affect our lessons or games is when the student goes to get wealth out of the bank. they will have to have an increment of 50 cents. I don't think this will affect anything too negatively. Typically when you go to the ATM, they give you money in multiples of $10 or $20. So even in the real world, wealth is given to customers in specific increments. However, although our commodity can only be divided down to 50 cents, when doing calculations in our lessons and games, I will still assume that money can be divided all the way down to the penny. The penny is, of course, the lowest denomination in U.S. currency, and we want our lessons and games to mimic real currency as best as possible. The fact that marbles can only be divided down to 50 cents offers a lesson on what makes for a good currency. The only thing that I can think of that would be infinitely divisible is some type of raw material. A raw material is unformed and homogeneous, thus you can keep dividing it further and further into smaller amounts. This is why we would use silver or gold as an ideal commodity to back up our currency. So this is why I chose marbles. To meet all the requirements of a good commodity to use as currency. They are fungible, they are not consumable, they are not perishable, they are a luxury, they have a dense value, they are divisible far enough, they have an eternal value, and we will force rarity by limiting the number of marbles in the classroom. Another reason why I chose marbles is for the simple fact that they can roll. In some of our lessons on banking and on cash in and cash out, the fact that marbles can roll will be beneficial. Also, all of these lessons and games are meant for students, most of whom will probably be under the age of 18. Marbles have an appeal to students of all ages, and they have an appeal to both boys and girls. Also, of all the toys that I could have picked, I thought marbles replicated precious metals the best. They are shiny and alluring, and they are fun to play with. So for all these reasons, I chose marbles. I have one final idea for this lesson on a commodity-based currency, and that is to show the student what I have here, which is a silver certificate. If you can observe on the top of the dollar, it says, "This certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America," and on the bottom it says, $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. I think this wraps up the lesson on a commodity-based currency nicely. It shows very clearly that U.S. money at one time could be exchanged for real wealth. It may prompt the student to ask questions. Questions like, how much silver could be exchanged? Was this exchange rate the same throughout all of U.S. history? It also shows what the wealth was, which was silver. After being presented this lesson on a commodity-based currency, the student can ponder why silver was used to back up money. They may also wonder why gold was not used, and perhaps what would happen if silver and gold were used in a bimetallic standard, which is an advanced lesson that we will go over later. When watching this lesson, I hope that you noticed that the lessons that were taught were very easy to follow along with. However, the lessons that were taught are ones that can sometimes otherwise be difficult to understand. I believe that using the tangible materials helps bring these otherwise difficult lessons to life. And that is the goal throughout this educational system to teach students economics. It is to minimize the difficulty in learning, but maximize what is learned.